Today we are going to discuss the vestibular system, vertigo, and dizziness. The special senses were created to help the interaction between the living organism and the surrounding. The eyes are there so that we can see what's around us. The nose is there so that we can smell, the taste, to taste our food, to protect ourselves from bad food, from poisons. The ears are there for hearing so that we can hear what's happening around us. But there is another sense which is working all the time in the background, and this is the vestibular system. The vestibular system aims mainly at gaze stabilization. That means we can see a moving target all the time without having any disturbance in our vision. The second purpose of the vestibular system is to achieve postural control. That is, we can walk, we can go up the stairs, we can go down the stairs, we can even stand on one leg, and we do not lose our balance. The third important function is spatial orientation. That is, we know what is around us, where are we in our environment, are we up, are we down, are we moving forwards, backwards, to the right, to the left, are we moving around, or if our surrounding is moving as well. And it helps determine our position. When we go into a room, we know where is the front wall, where is the back wall, if we are moving towards one of the walls or not, if our surrounding is moving. For instance, if you are in a car and the car around you starts to move, or your car is starting to move, you know exactly the type of movement, the direction of movement, and the velocity of movement. Surprisingly, the vestibular system is also responsible about other functions of which we are not aware. One of these functions is fast blood regulation when we change our posture. You know, when you are lying down and when you are standing up, changes in the baroreceptors occur and blood pressure starts to accommodate for this new posture. The heart rate, the heart pumping functions are changing, but these are very slow reflexes. The vestibular reflexes are much, much more rapid, and they affect the first change in the blood pressure and in the heart rate, and then the baroreceptors and the cardiovascular receptors as well start acting. Another important function is the influence of the vestibular system on the circadian rhythm, on the sleep-wake cycle. As you know, if any lady has her young child and the child starts to cry, what does she do? She starts rocking the child in certain rhythmic movement, and this stimulates the vestibular system in a way so it will start affecting the sleep-wake cycle, and we know when we should wake up, when we should sleep, and this is associated with the part of the limbic system and with the part of the hypothalamus, which are responsible for our sleep-wake cycle as well. So as you see, the vestibular system is involved in so many of the vital functions of the organism. How does it achieve this function? Like any other reflex, like any other action, we have an input coming from the outside and an output which affects what we are going to do. The first input of the vestibular system is exactly where am I? What is my position in space? What's around me, what's above me, what's below me, what's to my right, what's to my left. And for this we have an interaction of three main systems: the vestibular system itself, vision, and the proprioceptive system. The vestibular system in the inner ear will give its input, and we are going to see the type of input we get from the vestibular system. The vision, we rely on our vision so that we can know what's around us, especially in light. And the proprioceptive system, you have studied in the basic physiology that the proprioceptive system will give us a sensation on our feet, a sensation in our muscles, a sensation in our tendons, in our joints, so that we know exactly the posture we have. All these inputs are channeled into the cerebellum, and we call the cerebellum the computer or the integrator of the vestibular system. All these information are integrated, they are compared to each other, and in the best of the conditions, the three inputs should be concordant. That is, they are giving the same information at the same time. All this information is streamlined, it is put into a regular package, and it goes to my in the central nervous system do integrate this, and then they are planning our movement. Where am I? What am I going to do? I'm going to stay still. Am I going to move to the right? I'm going up the stairs. Am I moving in a vehicle? This is what I'm going to do. These information are integrated and then compared to our pre-planned motion plans. For instance, a young kid who starts to walk does not know how to walk. They start to hold on things until the program, the motor program, is integrated and we start moving even without looking forward, looking into our mobile phones, looking into window shops, and so on and so forth. And this is the motor activity, which is an automatic activity. So we have our vestibular input, and this is translated and integrated with our stored motor output, and then we start moving. Once we start moving, all these information will change. I was standing in point X, now I move to point Y at a certain velocity in a certain direction. So all the primary input has changed, and this again forms a loop. So we have our changing input, which will influence again our changing output. And this is the balance system and the balance physiologic loop. When we are starting to talk about motion, we have three main types of motion. Linear acceleration, that is, I'm starting to move in one direction, in a single direction, whatever this direction will be, in the horizontal plane. Starting to move forward, starting to move backward, to the right, to the left, or in any direction in the horizontal plane. This is what we call linear acceleration. At the same time, we can rotate, we can change our direction, we can turn our head to the right, to the left, upwards or backwards. This is what we call an angular rotation. This has a certain speed, certain velocity, and a certain degree. And we do not forget that we are on Earth, and we are always under the influence of gravity. And this is the vertical vector or the vertical direction of movement. And so to have a proper balance system, we should sense all these types of movement: linear acceleration, angular rotation, and the effect of gravity. And for that purpose, we have 5 receptors on each side of the head. On each inner ear, right inner ear and left inner ear, we have 5 receptors. These receptors are oriented in space to be able to detect these types of movements in the best possible way. We have linear acceleration, which is sensed by the utricle, which is placed on horizontal. We have angular rotation, which is detected by the 3 semicircular canals which are present in the X, Y, and Z. And we have the vertical motion, which is sensed by the saccule. All these receptors function on the same principle. They are oriented in space. They are paired. The right side is paired with the left side, so that when the impulse is given from one side, the same impulse, but in a negative direction, is given from the other side. So they are complementary. So we have a double input, which gives a double security. For instance, if I'm moving my head to the right side, the right ear will give me a positive indicator. The left ear at the same time will give me a negative signal, but with the same degree. So if I'm moving to the right side, for instance, 10 degrees, my right ear will give me the information that you are moving to the right plus 10 degrees. At the same moment, the left ear will give me the same information that I am not moving to the left 10 degrees. Or one ear gives me a plus signal and the other ear gives me a minus signal. So we have information which is confirmed, which is doubly confirmed, which is doubly checked. So my vestibular system knows exactly that this information is true. So this is one sort of double security of my system. The same happens in linear acceleration, in vertical motion, in any type of direction. Both ears will give me either the same information in the same degree or the same information but in opposite degrees, so that I know exactly what I am doing. All receptors work in the same direction, in the same principle. There is sensor cells. These are the sensor cells. these are directional cells. So when the cell moves towards the cilia, it is stimulated. When it moves away from the cilia, it is inhibited, like any other physiologic neural system. How are these cells stimulated? For instance, in the retina, we say that the cells are stimulated by light waves, but in the vestibular system, they are stimulated by motion. How are we going to move these cells? All these cilia of these ciliated cells are embedded in a gel, in a matrix. This gel is either fixed in one cupula or in one sensory organ, or there are some crystals which are moving on top of these cilia. So when the head moves, the cilia are moved in a direction opposite the head of movement by inertia. Like when we move a piece of jello, when you move this jar, the jello will move in the opposite direction because of its inertia. It's the same principle which occurs in the inner ear. When the head moves in one direction, this gel, by its inertia, by its weight, will move in the opposite direction and will stimulate these cells. So when the head moves in one direction, the gel, either here or here, lags behind, like this jello exactly, and will lead to stimulation of the hair cells which are oriented. They have a positive direction and a negative direction. So here we have 3 ways to detect motion and 3 ways to acknowledge exactly what is happening. The pairing of both ears, the right ear and the left ear, and the directionality of these sensory cells. So we have exactly the information of the direction of movement, the velocity of movement, or whether we are moving or not moving. But there is a small defect in the vestibular system. Once the motion is uniform, I have reached a certain velocity, the vestibular system stops giving us information. Exactly like when we move this piece of jelly, and if we keep moving it at a certain velocity, it stops moving. And we all actually experience this. When you are in an airplane, although the airplane is moving very fast, you don't feel that it is moving. But if it starts changing its velocity, you start again knowing that it is moving forwards or backwards. And so the vestibular system stops acting once we reach a constant velocity, and that is why we have to rely on other senses like vision and proprioception to know that there is movement or there is really everything is stable. Like you see, the directions of the both ears are complementary. When one ear gives a positive stimulus, the left ear gives the negative stimulus, and both should be exactly of the same amount. And if one of these gives a signal which is contradictory with the other, the vestibular system, especially the cerebellum, will compare these data from both vestibular systems, integrate them with the signals coming from the vision and from the proprioceptive system to say, yes, these signals are concordant, okay, we are going to understand them, or there is something problematic between these systems, and we are going to see what is going to happen when these signals are not concordant with each other. The input has come from the vestibular system, and as you know, all special senses will go into the brainstem nuclei. For the vestibular system, they are termed the brainstem vestibular nuclei. These nuclei will give signals to achieve our function. Our functions are, to recapitulate, gaze stabilization, postural control, and spatial orientation. So we have to have something which will join the vestibular system with these outputs. So the signals coming from the vestibular system will go into the brainstem vestibular nuclei, and these will be distributed into 3 main systems. The oculomotor nuclei, so when I stimulate the vestibular system, the eyes will move. This is the vestibulo-ocular reflex. When I stimulate the vestibular system, the long tracts of the spinal cord will be stimulated to maintain posture. You have studied in your basic physiology courses how posture is maintained, especially with the axial musculature, with the spinal muscles, and with the muscles of the lower limb. So the vestibulospinal system will affect the muscles of the neck, will affect the muscles of the spine, and will affect especially the lower limbs to maintain our upright posture. And at the same time, there is another output which goes to the autonomic center. And as I mentioned before, there is control of the blood pressure, there is control of the cardiac output, and there are some additional stimuli into the hypothalamus and into the chemoreceptor trigger zone. And I think all of us have experienced the very bad sensation of nausea and vomiting when you are moving, spinning very rapidly, for instance, at the playground. We have this sensation of nausea and vomiting, and this is one of the integral stimuli of the vestibular system as well. These stimuli are all very rapid stimuli. And when we are exposed to a rapid stimulus, we have to have something to modify it and to streamline it so we don't have a rapid reflex reaction. And this is the role of the cerebellum. As we have mentioned before, the cerebellum integrates all the vestibular inputs, and at the same time, it dampens all these reactions so we can maintain our posture, we can maintain our vision without a rapid reaction. And at the same time, we have voluntary control over this. For instance, I am moving my head, and I know that the vestibular system will cause my eyes to move in the opposite direction. But voluntarily, I can maintain my gaze, maintain my eye posture in spite of the vestibular system. And the cerebellum here will try to control this, to dampen this, and to coordinate the voluntary control with this reflex control as well, so that we don't have any jerky movements of the vestibular responses. The vestibular output will affect our gaze stabilization and will affect our postural control. As I mentioned before, the semicircular canals will affect basically the gaze stabilization system. As you can see, when I move my head to one direction, my eyes will move to the opposite direction so that I can maintain gaze on my target without any change in my eye position as long as I'm changing the head. At the same time, postural stability will affect the muscles of the contralateral side. When I move my head to one side, when I tilt my head to one side, I can fall on this side. So the vestibular system will stimulate the axial muscles to maintain this posture so that we do not fall. And as I mentioned, both ears should be complementary and both ears should give the same output at the same time, but in opposite directions so that I can integrate all of this. So gaze stabilization, postural control, and spatial orientation are the important functions of the vestibular system. And as you have seen, we have the outputs, the stimulus, and the integration of all these vestibular systems to maintain our posture and our control. When this system fails, some manifestation will occur. And as we mentioned before, the eyes will be affected, and the posture will be affected, and at the same time, the autonomic system will be affected. Gaze stabilization, postural control, and the autonomic systems. I don't know if you remember this gentleman. This was a very famous comedian, film comedian. He had very good films. And in one of the films, he has a very small song. This song will sum up all the vestibular system when it fails. He starts with أنا عيني بترف وراسي بتلف وحاسس بمصيبة جاية لي. عيني بترف means that there is some ocular movement. The eyes are moving in a certain direction. And this is the loss of gaze stabilization of the vestibular system. راسي بتلف. I have vertigo. My head is spinning. I'm not stable. حاسس بمصيبة جاية لي. Like we said, the autonomic output will lead to an abnormal sensation of nausea and vomiting and a sensation of fear. If you go in an amusement park and you go in a roller coaster, you can really experience what does a vestibular dysfunction lead like. So it's the same. Abnormal eye movements because there is loss of the vestibular visual control. Abnormal postural control. I am unstable. I feel that everything is turning. It is not turning. As if the vestibular system works by itself and give me abnormal sensation of movement. So I feel that everything is spinning around me, everything is turning, I'm not stable, I cannot walk in a straight line, there is loss of spatial orientation. I feel that the ceiling is falling, that everything is not stable in its place, and this is postural control and loss of visual stabilization and of spatial orientation. And at the same time, I will have other additional effects like nausea and vomiting, sense of apprehension and fear, tachycardia, and even peripheral vasoconstriction and cold extremities. And some of the patients will really fall on the ground without losing their consciousness because of the power of these abnormal sensations. So when the vestibular system fails, abnormal eye movements, and this will give me a sensation that all my surrounding is moving. I cannot stabilize my gaze. I cannot look at something. I even cannot read in a book. I cannot look into my mobile phone. I cannot watch television. I cannot drive. I cannot walk by myself because everything around me is moving in an abnormal sensation, and I cannot really focus on what I am looking at. I am afraid of falling because I cannot walk in a straight line. I have all the time to have a visual reference. I have to look to something stable that I know that it is stable. I have to touch something so that my proprioceptive system will give me tactile feedback. I know that the wall is stable, so I can rely that the wall is stable and I can walk besides the wall to maintain my movement in a straight line. And at the same time, whenever I have a rapid movement, I will feel this sensation of nausea and vomiting. And so many of the patients with vestibular dysfunction will not be able to drive, will not be able to walk alone, will not be able to move in the dark. Sometimes they are even unable to read or to watch television, and all their lifestyle is really affected by these vestibular dysfunctions. This is fine, but basic science is not available to the general public. Patients do not study medicine like we do. And so they come complaining of certain complaints which we should translate into our symptoms. Many patients will come with very different manifestations, but they all will sum up our vestibular system. Many patients will come simply, يا دكتور أنا عندي دوخة, and we have to question them. Other patients will tell you other things. يا دكتور أنا حاسس إن أنا في مركب، الأرض تحتية مش ثابتة طول الوقت بتتمرجح، أنا حاسس إن أنا ماشي بتطوح كأني بتعاطى حاجة، كل ما أجي أمشي لقدام ألاقي نفسي بخبط شمال بخبط يمين، مش قادر أتحرك في خط مستقيم، لازم أمشي مع حد يسندني، لازم أمشي جنب الحيطة، لازم يبقى معايا عصاية وإلا هقع. أو العيان يجي يقول لك أنا فجأة حسيت الأرض بتتشقلب بيا، السقف بقى تحت والأرضية بقت فوق والدولاب هيقع عليا، أنا حاسس إن أنا بقع، كل ما اجي اقف لوحدي كده اروح واقع، بس ما بفقدش الوعي، ببقى دريان بكل اللي حواليا، بس لما اجي امشي او فجاه كده الاقي نفسي وقعت. وبعض الاحيان العين يقول لك لا انا وقعت وحسيت ان الدنيا اسودت ومش شايف حاجه قدام. All of these are manifestation of loss of visual control, loss of visual stability, and loss of postural control and of spatial orientation. As you have seen, there are so many manifestations which can lead to the suggestion of vestibular dysfunction. However, not all vertigo or instability or دوخة أو عدم اتزان are related to the vestibular system alone. As we have seen in the physiology, the vestibular system is a very complicated system which involves the vestibular system, the visual system, the proprioceptive system, and so we have to know that patients with vestibular-like symptoms may have affections in the vestibular system alone, in the central integrators alone, or even in both together. So we can have a combined problem in the vestibular system or in the central nervous system, which is responsible for the integration and the coordination of the vestibular system. And that is why we have to keep in mind that we have to investigate all these involved systems when we have a patient presenting with vertigo. These are all related together: the hair cells, brainstem, the inner ear, the central nervous system, and as well, we should not forget that all these very sensitive neural tissues are very avid in blood supply and oxygen. So not only the local cells may fail, the local systems may fail, but they may fail because of lack of nutrition, lack of blood supply, lack of oxygenation. And this compounds even the problem more and more, because not only the system may be healthy, but the blood supply is not enough, the oxygen supply is not enough, and so any disorder, any systemic problem which can affect the blood supply, which can affect the oxygenation of the system, may lead to vestibular dysfunction as well. So when we have a patient with vestibular dysfunction, we have to think about the peripheral vestibular system, about the central nervous system, about all the components of these systems, and as well on the oxygen supply and the blood supply to this system at the same time. And that is why we have to be very precise in taking a very detailed clinical history of the patient, not only the vestibular system, but also on all other systems, and examine the ears, examine the eyes, examine the central nervous system, and examine the cardiovascular system as well. At the same time, we have very specific vestibular examinations, which are a little bit beyond your curriculum nowadays, but if you're interested, you can visit our department at any time at the vestibular unit, so that you can see real patients, you can see how we are taking our history, how we are examining the patients, and at the same time, how we can investigate these patients, because we have so many investigations which are proper to the vestibular system, which can clinch our diagnosis as well. As you see, we can have so many symptoms, so many things which can interrelate, which can lead to these vestibular dysfunction. And when we suspect a patient with a vestibular disorder, we can examine the patient and we can investigate the patients. And we have a large number of investigations which can diagnose or at least direct our attention to the site of lesion. And in any vestibular unit, you have apparatus, we have machines which can test all the parts of the vestibular system. We can look at the eye movements, we can see nystagmus, we can look at the rotational movements, we can look at the postural stability of the patient, and all these systems are actually available, and we are testing our patients. And when we suspect that there are other systems which are affected, we can have some other investigation to investigate the audition of the patient, because the inner ear is composed of two parts, as you have known, hearing and balance. And most of the time, when hearing is affected, balance is affected, and vice versa. Sometimes hearing can be affected without affection of the vestibular system, and sometimes the vestibular system can be affected without affection of hearing, but usually both go hand in hand. And when we have a patient with vestibular symptoms, we usually test hearing as well. We can investigate the cardiovascular system, the CNS, the blood supply, the oxygen supply, and all the disease which can affect the blood supply, which can affect the flow of oxygen to the tissues as well. So patients should be taken in a holistic manner. It is not only the inner ear which may be affected, but all the systems related to the inner ear, the system which can affect the function of the central nervous system as well.